Why isn't it? Oh, maybe it don't. Oh, I guess it does. All right. This in with vaYiqra, chapter 23, verse 1. That is Leviticus 23:1 for the uninitiated. Now it starts off by saying, Vayedaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. You guys got that right? I bet you do. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying. So I do want to point something out here. We talk about the onkelos an awful lot, particularly the Drauzine and Wagner translation of it, which is my absolute all-time favorite. It's a wonderful work. They really know their stuff. No, I don't agree with 100%, but it's kind of like 99.59. It's pretty close. They do a very good job. They pointed out that the word translated from the Aramaic into English as with was, but see, that word in Hebrew starts with lamed, which we normally translate as two. And so my translation, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe. Well, whoever wrote the onkelos, now we know good and well the guy that supposedly named onkelos, I don't even know that the man ever existed. There was a man named Achalos who lived prior to the time of onkelos, not very far prior, but a little bit before this guy onkelos. All of the stories told about Achalos. Now, this was a Greek, I don't know, philosopher, kind of partial historian, if you will. Another guy that whether he lived for real or not is questionable. But all of the stories told about this man's miraculous conversion and miraculous ability to live through so many violent attacks on his life, because God was in his life, and all of those stories are told about this guy onkelos. The problem with onkelos, the guy, if he did in fact exist, which I highly doubt, because when your life completely, utterly and completely is the same as somebody else's life, I have to question, I would question the idea of Achalos, because the stories are so wildly unimaginable that you can't imagine any of that being true in the first place. Then we get the next guy, onkelos, who has the exact same life. Problem, the reason why we know for sure, even if there was a guy named by that name, we know he didn't write the book that's called the Onkelos because, well, it was written after he died. Sorry. And Drauzine and Wagner do point that out. And the way they know that is because there are direct quotes from other sources that were not written until after the time of this man Onkelos's life would have, when he would have been alive. So there's no way he wrote this thing. But anyway, whoever wrote this Onkelos translation had a problem with authority. Let's just put it that way. Because, let me see, he saw the word to, T-O, spoke to Moses, right? Spoke to Moshe. He saw that word as dictatorial, pushy, rude. And so he changed the word he changed it in his translation to mean with, the word we would translate as with, W-I-T-H. And he saw the word with as respectful, humble, or polite or something. I don't know. This work, this onkelos work, and again, we don't know who actually wrote it, truly had a problem with God's authority over everyone, and with Nevi'im, or prophets such as Moshe, having authority over the people of Israel. seemed to have a real problem with authority, regardless of what it was. Well, until it came to the rabbin, then he was okay with their authority, apparently. I still haven't looked that up. I'll talk about that in a minute. So he made changes, but by making changes like these, I should say, may well be the reason why the rabbim, or the sages, eventually declared their authority over God. Did you know that that happened? Do you realize that's in the Talmud? So I want to point out a book to you. It's called Rabbinic Judaism Debunked. It's written by Eitan Bar and Golan Broshi. I don't know who these guys are. I don't know. It says on the back cover that they both have doctorate degrees. A D Min, that's the lowest doctorate degree that you can receive, and that's a Christian. It would indicate Christian education, but it doesn't say where. I mean, if you got the lowest degree from Oxford University, that still means something. You know what I mean? So I don't know where they got their education. I wish they would have said. The book is overall, I would highly recommend it. It's a good book for every Jew and every Christian to read. And the research portion of the book, it was, they wrote around their research, which I really like. I like the research, actually. Instead of it just pointing, you get the little number, the tiny number at the end of some sentence, and then you got to look down at the bottom of the page, and then it says, this comes from this or that or the other. There's a lot of that in here, but they actually put what was said in the work, and I do like that. The research portion of it was very well done. Their conclusions and arguments, for the most part, were pretty good. There's a couple of places, and I'm talking a couple, like 2, maybe 3, where they're way off, and I do mean way off the mark. But the rest of it, pretty much spot on. I don't think either one of them were yeshiva students, because that's where they really kind of veered off the track, because they're talking for yeshiva students. I am a yeshiva student, and their conclusions don't line up with the education in a yeshiva. So that's a little sad, but I still think it's well worth reading, and you guys, I'm sure, will pick up on the things that all that great, because anyway, they've got this chapter. Well, I'm calling it a chapter. It says Argument 14, Chapter 2, Dispelling Rabbinical Argument on the Source of the Oral Law, and this is Argument 14. Starts on page 79. I don't think I want to start that early. But they're talking about the verse in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 11 through 14. And let's see. Their translation of that verse says, "Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in heaven. It is not in the heavens," and that's the most important part. They've emboldened those words. It is not in the heavens. That you should say, "Who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea, that you should say, 'Who among us can cross the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to observe it. Again, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 11 through 14. And a lot of the Christians that listen in on us will recognize that that's actually quoted in the New Testament as well, which shouldn't surprise anybody since the entire New Testament is based on the part of the book they so wrongly call the Old Testament, but I digress. Okay, their conclusion on that was it is important to note that the argument of it is not in the heavens relates to the fact that the mitzvah handed down by God is not distant and complex. It does not compel us to rely on a religious cleric to interpret it for us. Rather, it is very close to us, very simple to understand and easy to carry out. But their conclusion as to the meaning is actually the Torah is easy to understand. It is telling us at best that we too can read it, but none of that's actually accurate. That's just not what's happening here. But they're right to point out there's something wrong with what the Rabbim, the sages, did to it. Very right to point that out. They said that there's okay, let's see if I can find the right spot. The verse does not mean that when taken in context, the verse relates to keeping the mitzvot. You know, those are the laws and the commandments, which are possible and close to our heart. Okay, then it says, Rabbi David Dov Lebanon is not the first to take those words out of context in order to argue in favor of rabbinical authority. Our sages committed that transgression even earlier in the Talmud, truth be told, as the most significant milestone in Judaism. I totally have to agree with that. To explain what we mean, allow us first to go back a few steps. Where Judaism converged around the tabernacle and temple in biblical times, then 2,000 years ago when the temple was destroyed, and I've changed their sentence here because the way they wrote it's incorrect. I don't think they meant it that way, but I'm put it my way, and they can argue with me if they want to. The rabbis instantaneously reinvented Judaism. And so they say, take Yom Kippur as an example. According to Jewish tradition, as every Yom Kippur ended, the people asked God for confirmation that the sins were atoned and forgiven. What was the approval? Rashi, in his interpretation, we're going all the way, this is the 1200s, not something somebody from the time period of the temple would have said. This is somebody 1,200 years later. For Yoma 39 explains that the crimson thread of wool turned from crimson to white, demonstrating that God had forgiven Israel. In short, the crimson thread was responsible for determining whether the sins of Israel were absolved. But pay attention to this in the Gemara, Yoma chapter 4. Our sages say that 40 years before the temple was destroyed, the said crimson thread stopped running white and thus caused, along with other sins, a great deal of concern among the leaders. God stopped granting his Yom Kippur affirmation as of 30 AD. The crimson thread no longer turned white, meaning that the divine spirit had left and is no longer present in the temple. and the Yom Kippur sacrifice is no longer accepted for atoning sins. This means that the temple ceased to exist as a place that inspires divinity. In other words, according to the rabbis themselves, God is no longer willing to accept the Yom Kippur sacrifice, and the sins are not atoned. God ceased to dwell in the temple as of 30 AD, and it was destroyed 40 years later. From then on, in the absence of the temple, an empty void was formed to which the rabbis entered in an attempt to reinvent Judaism, where it could continue functioning without the temple, without sacrifices, without the atonement of sins, and without God's intervention. That is indeed what they did. They no longer needed affirmation from God because they decided to remove him from the equation and take his place. Of course, you do realize this crimson thing is not how God told us we would know that our sins were forgiven. It was the fire coming down. Anyway, we'll move on. They go on. It's almost done. Read the legend that the rabbis themselves documented in Talmud Bava Metzia 59. This is no doubt the most significant Talmudic section of Halakhic Judaism, demonstrating how the rabbis ousted God from his position and took over his authority. Stated, the Talmudic story relates to a debate regarding a relatively trivial, I'm not even sure how you say that in English. I would have said halakha, raised by a man named Achnai, who owned a clay oven. This guy took the oven apart and reassembled it, presenting the Sanhedrin with the following question: is the new oven pure or impure? The Talmud states that Rabbi Eliezer provided all of the answers in the world to prove that the oven is pure. But most of the Sanhedrin sages, led by Rabbi Yehoshua, rejected Rabbi Eliezer's answer and argued that it is impure. Rabbi Eliezer did not give up, and he proved his argument with supernatural omens. A fig tree was miraculously uprooted and replanted on the other side of the yard. Water flowed up the mountain against the law of gravity, and other miracles to prove that Rabbi Eliezer was right. The climax occurred when Rabbi Eliezer cried out for God's help. If the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, heaven will prove it. Then, they say, a divine voice emerged from heaven and supported Rabbi Eliezer. This is the divine voice saying, why are you differing with Rabbi Eliezer, as the halakha is in accordance with his opinion in every place that he expresses an opinion? In other words, God called out in a divine voice from the heavens that he supports Rabbi Eliezer. Then rose Rabbi Yehoshua and declared one of the nations of the it is not in heaven. Remember those words that were bolded? In other words, the authority is no longer in heaven with God. From now on, the mandate is granted to the rabbis. They now have the power and control. But ironically, the legend written by the rabbis does not end here. Stay with me. This is unreal. Here. Yeah, I was trying to find it. The Talmud goes on to say that after the rabbis rejected God's ruling, God smiled subserviently and said, my children have triumphed over me. My children have triumphed over me. In other words, according to the legend that the rabbis themselves invented, in other words, the rabbis concocted a story by which God granted them divine authority. In this Talmudic tale, comprising the root of rabbinical authority, it is very easy to identify the logical flaw of circular reasoning. After all, where does the argument for rabbinical authority come from? From the story invented by the rabbis themselves. You get the circular? You will not find a better example for circular reasoning anywhere else. Wow. And I think that occurrence came in large part because, especially when you're talking about somebody writing this from the latter period of the Talmud writings, you're talking about a group of people who had never been in the land of Israel. They did not speak the Hebrew language. They did not study or read from the Torah itself. All they had was the Aramaic. They spoke Aramaic. They did not realize how different their dialect of Aramaic was in comparison to the biblical Hebrew. They didn't recognize the simplest of Hebrew idioms, didn't understand the grammar rules. They didn't know any of the grammar rules, that the writing style was completely foreign to them. And they had come to this place primarily because of the Onkelos, where the Jews could do no wrong. Even though God himself said that Aharon committed a sin, and this was all squarely on his shoulders, they told stories about Aharon, creating this golden calf in order to save the Jews. They just never, they got rid of all the bad and the ugly and rewrote it so there was only good and only heroes, and if you follow what I'm saying. And then they get a book where the translator whoever wrote this, Onkelos, had no clue he knew what almost none of the idioms meant. Every once in a while he got lucky and stumbled across the meaning somehow. For the most part, he didn't recognize it at all. He didn't understand the development, the writing style, and why things were repeated as often as they were, as none of the sages knew any of that as well. So you wind coming to a point where the sages now have replaced God Almighty, and God is subservient to their laws. Wow. And it all started with changing, God having the ability to command Moshe. Like at least one sage actually did translate this as command Moshe. And God commanded Moshe saying, instead of saying God spoke to Moshe saying, which I don't have a problem with that. I think that translation using command instead of spoke is just fine. But then you need know a little bit about Hebrew grammar to know why I would agree with that. So let's move on to verse 2. It's verse 1. So our literal translation here is, speak to the children of Israel and say you to them, appointed times Yahweh, that shall call out they with them convocations holy, these they appointed times my. And that's about as literal as it gets, right? So we start off with the word daber. But it's the idea of setting in a row, of ranging in an order. These are words that lead and words that guide. It's even used of shepherds leading and guiding their flocks. It's not really used of that so much as that's an example that's given in that the flock follows that shepherd's every move, and these words should be words that you can follow, make every move according to those words. So it's important that we understand the meaning of the word. This is El B'nai Yisrael. So arrange these words in a very specific order such that the children of Yisrael will be able to follow them, right? And then it says, Ve'amarta. So now we have say, speak and say, right? I don't know if speak is really I guess speak's okay. Could be command. Anyway, amarta, that's to say. The primary signification is to bear forth, hence to bring it to light. So I like to put it this way. It's to shed light on the subject. So it's a little different, right? These are both words that could be translated as speak or say. Either one of those words would work for either one of these in English, but this one is not of that putting the words in an order so that they can follow them. It's now you're going to illuminate those words to bring light, to shed light on the subject. So you're going to illuminate those words. You're going to make real sure at this point that they're going to understand what you're saying. Then it says, Aleihim, so say it, illuminate it to them. Already we know it's the B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel. Then it says, Moadei Yahweh. So these, Moadei is your first word. That's, we'll say appointed times. It's a set time, a set festival, like on the 14th day of the first month and the 15th day of the first month and the so-and-so day of the whatever month, right? So that's a very specific time being set, and that's what it means by appointed time. So it's used for all kinds of things. For instance, we have a Shabbat meeting pretty much at the same time every week. We were a little late today, I admit, but I couldn't get my act together. Sorry. But we meet every Shabbat, right? And every Shabbat for us is the sun goes down on Friday until the sun goes down on Saturday, as we call it here in America. That time period between the setting of the suns is a day of rest for us every single week without fail. That's the day that we don't work. It's getting to where it's the day I sleep almost the whole day. Very refreshing. But anyway, that's an appointed time. But also the feast, the 14th day of the first month and all that, that's a set time. So it can be anything from that to, hey, let's get together Wednesday at 2:30. Well, that's a set time. So you guys get the idea. But this is a set time. This is appointed or set by God because it gives his name right after it says that, right? Then it says, Asher Tikreu. So we've added the tate, the tik, you hear the T sound to the beginning, to the front part of the word kara, which is to cry out with a loud, passionate voice. It's all kinds of stuff like that. It's even used of groaning. It's to, make a sound. But this, adding the tate to the front of it, makes it a command. God's not supposed to make a command. Oh, no, that's not us. That's Uncle us. Anyway, so they're going to cry out. They're going to make an announcement. They're going to call a meeting, if you will. This is Otam, to them, with them, doesn't really matter. Mik Ra'eh. So that's a calling together, an assembly, a meeting, a service. There's all kinds of words that we could use there. And then it says Kodesh. So it's saying this is holy. And if it's holy, what does that mean? It means it is set aside for a very specific purpose, and you are not going to do something else on that day. Whatever it is that that day is set aside for, that's the only thing you're supposed to do on that day. So we have Ele Hem Maodai. So you've got, these are holy meetings. Oh, they are appointed time. They are appointed. They are set. Okay. So your translation is pretty simple. Speak to, not with, speak to the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, and say to them the Moeday, the appointed times of Yahweh, in which they, speaking of the children of Yisrael, will proclaim in them the Mikra Kodesh, that's the holy meetings. These are my, remember this is God speaking, these are my Moeday. This verse is a command to all the children of Israel, not just the Kohanim, not just the priests, but everyone. It is noticeable that almost all the feast-related commands are directed towards the priests. In this chapter, I should be more specific. But it should also be obvious that the reason why everyone had to know all the rules, everybody has to know all the rules, is because God knew there would be times when Yisrael would be captives and times when there would be no Kohanim, no priests, no Heichal, no temple. God, kind of knew that. In those times, we all need to know the rules because we are supposed to follow these eternal feasts and sacrifices in these times of captivity or no temple, no priest. We're not supposed to replace the rules with new ones. In short, prayer does not replace sacrifice, since sacrifice is eternal to every generation. God said it, not me. All right, moving on to verse 23. I was going to say, I thought I saw a flash and then I didn't. Okay, so very, very literal translation. 6 days you shall do workmanship, and day this. Something weird just happened. Hold on, I can't even see my text yet. We usually just click on this wackadoo here, that goes away. Micro junk is messing with my stuff here. I don't even know how to get rid of this. Wow, that was weird. Okay, well, I don't remember what it was, so I'll start again. 6 days you shall do no workmanship, and day the seventh, Shabbaton, convocation holy, all workmanship not you shall make they, Shabbat she, to Yahweh, in all dwellings your. This really wouldn't be too hard for you to put together as an English sentence from that, but let's work our way through it. So it says Shishet, which means 6, Yamim, that's days, Yom in plural is Yamim. Then it says Te'aseh, that's usually gets translated in the English as just do, D-O. Properly, it's to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce, to manufacture, to fabricate. It's work, right? And that can be you sitting at a computer typing all day. That can be you sitting on a phone calling, making cold calls all day. It's your work. It's what you do to make a living. Then it says melacha. Well, I've got that as workmanship. Properly, it's service, hence work prescribed to anyone, especially of the work of an artisan. It's from the root la'ach, which is to send a messenger, to be sent, to wait upon, to minister. It's a servant. So we're talking about your work, right? Then it says, u vayom. So that's and day. Yom, day. U vayom is how that winds up being pronounced. But so, and day. What day? Ha Shivi'i, the seventh day. So we would just say, and the seventh day. Then it says Shabbat, Shabbaton. You guys realize that's the same word. Shabbat in singular, Shabbaton in plural. So one is Sabbath, the other is Sabbaths. So it's to rest. We use it of our day of rest. The primary idea appears to be that of to sit down, to sit still, used of men as opposite to labor. In other words, men who are not working. Of a land that's not tilled, they call that Shabbat. Abstaining from a journey can even be a Shabbat if it's something you do often, like the journey you take to go to work. Anyway, to cease, to desist, it's all that stuff. And of course, both words mean the same thing. So there's something special here because you have the same word twice. And you know that there's some rules of grammar. If you're using the same word twice, there's emphasis. It's the way we put an exclamation point on the end of something, right? Then it goes on, Mikra Kodesh. So now you have a holy meeting. It's really the best way to think of Mikra Kodesh is it's a holy meeting. Then it says Kol Melacha, so all work. Lo, which not. Ta'asu, there's our word to do. All work, not you will do. And it's a command because they've added the tate to the front of it. So this is a command from God. He does have authority over us, regardless of what that rabbinic passage said. All right, so then we have the word Shabbat yet again. Then it says, Hev Layave. So that Hev is usually translated as she, or the word it, it. I should probably start with it and then say she, because if I pause in the wrong place long enough, you're going to get the wrong idea there, right? But remember, people who tell you there's no way to say it in Hebrew, that's not exactly right. There is. We use the word for he in place of it if the subject is masculine, and we use the word she for it if it's feminine, because it is a gender specific language. And so where in English, it can be used masculine or female, right? It has no gender, but in Hebrew, there is gender. So that's why it comes out she or perhaps it. And then it says La Yahweh, so that's to or for God. Bechol Mo Shevotechem. So Bechol, which is in all, whole, all, totality. You could say all, every, whatever. Then it says the next word is for your dwellings, is how we would say it. In Hebrew, it's dwellings you, or dwellings your, because it's plural. So you'd say your, because it's talking to all the children of Israel. So it's plural. So it's speaking of a seat, a place for sitting, a sitting down, an assembly of persons, because, a bunch of people are gathered together. So they're dwelling there together, whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 years, doesn't make any difference. That group of people is dwelling together. So that's why they say it that way. An assembly of persons, so if the persons gather up in the synagogue, on any given day, and they're having their little meeting, they're dwelling. Everybody is dwelling in that synagogue. You get it? But it's of your habitation. It's where you live. You dwell there, even though you're not there 24 hours a day. You dwell at your place of work. even though you're only there, what, 8 hours a day or something? All right, so our translation. 6 days you shall accomplish, instead of do, D-O, I put accomplish. 6 days you shall accomplish your melacha, your occupation. And the seventh day, a major Sabbath. So instead of putting the explanation point, just putting Sabbath explanation point, that doesn't make sense in English. We don't put explanation points in the middle of a sentence. So they say it twice, and we have to find some way to try to get across the importance of this Sabbath. This thing is saying this is a major Sabbath. It's already been called holy. We've already been told it belongs to God. Best I could come up with. It's a major Sabbath, people. A Mikra Kodesh. So it's a holy meeting on this Sabbath. Oh, there we go again. Oh, they went away that time. They shall not perform any occupation. It is a Shabbat. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh in all your dwellings. Doesn't make any difference where you're hanging out on that day. This is a Sabbath to Yahweh or for Yahweh. You can say it either way. That makes no difference to the Hebrew mind. All right. So of this word, melechet avodah, or I should say 2 words, there are many arguments given by various sages, scholars, and rabbin, that's rabbis, over the years, mainly due to their lack of understanding concerning biblical grammar, not recognizing the fact that Hebrew writers simply use different words that mean the same thing to break up monotony. These leaders of the people, as they're called, argued that there were 2 levels of work spoken of. Melechet was argued to be hard work. And I'm really simplifying this, but I think it's accurate enough. While avodah was seen as easy work. Thus, on the occasions when melechet avodah, occupational labor as I translate it, on the times when that was used, which it was not here, that's going to happen in verse 7, but on those times, the argument came to mean that neither type of work could be done. You see what's happening here? Once you've separated 2 different kinds of work, now if you have the easy task of, say, cooking food, cleaning and setting the tables and throwing the trash away, now all of a sudden you can pay somebody to maybe come and work on the Sabbath. Wow. When it's a hard work, well, that can't be done. Getting where this is going? Okay, I've said enough about that. So, of this idea, a major Sabbath is Shabbaton, Shabbat, or Shabbaton, doesn't matter which, you can do it either way in Hebrew. Another mistake in understanding of the sages, scholars, and rabbin caused by this lack of understanding of biblical grammar came from the use of Shabbaton, Shabbat, or Shabbat, Shabbaton. Again, it's written both ways, so don't worry about that. The emphasis by these leaders focused on the fact that Shabbat means rest. Thus, we had to be super restful on these occasions when it said Shabbaton or Shabbat, Shabbaton. You follow what I'm saying? And now we had to be super restful. Thus, let's see. However, the double use of the word, particularly because the first occurrence of the word is in the plural, while the second occurrence is in the singular, should have led them to see this phrase properly. The idea is that the high holy day, it's a high holy day. The double use was to add importance or emphasis on celebrating the feast, and actually had very little to do with rest. It's rest from work, but that doesn't mean you're supposed to not party hard. Can I say it that way? Then of the words in all your dwellings. While not based in a proper understanding and the reason not being logical, the sages, scholars, and rabbim actually got this one right. Do you hear what I'm saying? They don't know why they got it right, but they actually did get this right. For instance, even Ezra wrote that all your dwellings included every dwelling in the Holy Land, the diaspora, in all your personal homes, and any home you are in if you are away from home during the feast. They're right about that. It does include all of that, but their reasoning is actually incorrect. But at least they got it right. All right, verse 4. These appointed times, Yahweh convocations holy, that shall call out they with them in appointed times there. You realize we only got part of a sentence here. But anyway, Ele, these, Moadai, so those are your appointed times, Yahweh, and yeah, that Hebrew does not say Le Yahweh or Et Yahweh. It's just, we're just saying it in a more plain sense here. Again, another one of the grammar rules that got lost to Judaism was that you don't have to say the whole thing. Once you've said the whole thing, you can now cut it, like had it said Moadei Olah the first time around, and they only said Moadei after that, they all would have meant the same thing as the first one. So you can cut some things out. So they've left out the lamed, or maybe I did, I don't know. Doesn't matter because it still means the same thing. Then it says mikra'e. So we've gone from mikra, which is singular, to mikra'e, which is plural. So these are convocations. These are the is kara. We've added the mem to the beginning, which is generally from or of. Then you have kara, which is your word cry out or call out. And then they have the a. They've added that a sound to the end of it, which makes it plural. So that's the calling together. It's the meetings and all that kind of stuff. And then it says Kodesh, so that these are holy. Asher, and then it says Tikreu. We've already had this word. That's you're commanded to call out. It's the crying out. So it's the exact same word. We have mikra'e and tikreu are actually the same words. You just start adding things, the prefixes and suffixes make them sound different when you pronounce them. But they are the same word. Then it says otam. Let's just say them. That's okay. Be moadam. In appointed times, set times. It's the word for set time, but we added the bait to the beginning and the sound to the end of it. And so pretty much nothing's really changing here. So these, and I've had to add are the, so that in English you can understand it. We don't need those words in Hebrew, but you do need them in English. These are the Moadei. These are the appointed times of Yahweh. Mikra'e Kodesh, so they are holy meetings that shall be proclaimed in their appointed times. Kind of a summation is really all that is. Yeah, oh yeah, I've got time. So let's move on to verse 5. Very literal English. In new moon, the first, in 14, it's 4, and then it's the word teen, because we say 14 as a singular word in biblical Hebrew anyway. You give the number, and then you give another word that makes it teen. So it's actually 2 different words. That's why you wouldn't have picked up on that if I hadn't said anything, I'll bet. To T-O, new moon, between the evening, Pesach, to Yahweh. So we have Ba Chodesh, so in Chodesh, new moon. We use the word month here in America, but Chodesh it's literally new moon. Ha Rishon Rosh. So what are they saying in the head? Well, you could actually say that in the head, the beginning, but generally we'll just say first, in the first new moon. Ba'ar ba'a. That's the word for in, for. And then we have asar. So now it's in 14. Then it says bain. Bain is between. So between what? Ha'arbayim. Evening. The time between sunset and deep twilight. Evening. So between the evenings, as it is in plural. Then it says Pesach. You guys know what that is. That's Passover. La Yahweh, to Yahweh. There wasn't a lot of words there, right? So it says, in the first new moon on the 14th day of the new moon, between the evenings, and then I've had to add a couple words here because we need them in English, though we don't need them in Hebrew. Between the evenings will be the, and I've added a couple more words here, feast of, we don't need those in biblical Hebrew, the feast of Pesach, to Yahweh. Okay. Pesach to Yahweh. Many sages, scholars, and rabbim argue that there was no way to know if the use of Pesach is used in this verse to mean to pass over. In other words, if Pesach, if you spell that out in English and you put a small p, we would mean Passover. But if you put the capital P, now you have the proper noun, the name of the celebration, right? So the sages are saying there's no way because see, in Hebrew, we don't have capitals and smalls. What is that? When it's not capital, it's small. We do call it small. Okay. So they're saying that there was no way to know if that should be translated as Passover or as the title of the feast itself. And to that I say, really? The fact that Moshe had already written that the feast of Pesach takes place on the first new moon, on the 14th day of that new moon, and the fact that the next verse actually says the matzot takes place on the 15th day, that wasn't enough evidence. So let's give the devil his due here. What would this verse say if it meant to pass over? So on the first new moon of the 14th day, Yahweh is going to pass over. Over what? Or are we going to pass over Yahweh somehow? Is it going to pass over the land of Israel, the people of Israel, the moon? Dang, I wish I'd been looking at the moon on the 14th day of the first month every year. Maybe we could have seen Yahweh jumping over the thing. That's how ridiculous that argument is. I mean, it's just beyond reason ridiculous. It's Pesach, the feast. The whole thing starts off with, these are the feasts of God. And so now he's naming the feasts of God. Okay, anyway, I better get on to that. And it doesn't say Passover Yahweh. It says Pesach to Yahweh. Okay. And then let me see if I can squeeze one more in, just for good measure. The next verse starts off fifth. The next word is teen. So you know what's going to happen. 15. 15-day to new moon, this feast, the unleavened bread to Yahweh, 7 days unleavened bread shall eat they. That's the next verse. After we can't figure out, was this the Pesach or was God passing over the moon? Wow. The next thing talks about what happens on the 15th day of that new moon. So we're starting off with the word, it's the word for 5, but in this case it's fifth. Asar, so it's 15. We don't have to say on the 15th day in Hebrew. We just say 5-teen yom, 5-teen yom. That's on the 15th day is how that's going to wind up being translated. La Chodesh, so it's to new moon. Hazeh, this. If nothing else ties these two verses together, then this certainly does. This month. We're talking about the same month in supposedly the prior verse. It would have helped if they hadn't split this up in the middle of it. But anyway, this. Then it says, Hag Matzot. Hag ha-matzot. So it's the feast of the unleavened bread. La Yahweh, to Yahweh. Then it goes on, Shivat, which means 7. Yamim, that's day in plural. So it's days, 7 days. Matzot, that's unleavened bread in plural. Tochelu, so from ochal, to consume, to eat, but you put the tate in front of it, you're now commanded that you have to eat what? Well, it's already told us. Matzot, you have to eat breads with an S on the end. At least that's how some people take it. All right, so here's my translation. On the 15th day of the new moon of the Hag Ha-Matzot, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, to Yahweh, they shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days. So sages, scholars, and rabbin, you guys remember that means rabbis, change the plural matzot to singular matzah, arguing that the word should be in singular because we only eat one piece of matzah each evening. However, the rule of biblical grammar is such that if something is to be repeated, or especially if it is eternal, it is supposed to be written in plural. That's a rule of grammar, a hard and fast rule of biblical grammar. Thus, the amount of matzot eaten each night is neither specific or even important. It is plural because it happens every year to perpetuity. It's forever. It doesn't go away, so it has to be written in plural. So you're not being asked to eat a bunch of bread. You got to take a piece of bread and cut it up into 4 slices so you can have matzot instead of matzah. Lines. Okay, I've run out of time. Shalom, shalom, everyone. Oh my God, turn this off.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh Shmerecha. Ya'er Yahweh Panai Velecha Vihunecha. Yisa Yahweh Panai Velecha V'yasim Lecha Shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness and favor and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.